There we go. Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the November 28th, 2023 meeting for the Advisory Committee on University Records. We are being live streamed on KDLA's YouTube channel for open records or open meetings purposes. And now for the purposes of the minutes, I'm going to call for introductions. And when I call your name, please announce which institution you are representing. Vicki Cooper,
Northern Kentucky University.
Ruth Bryan,
University of Kentucky.
Hannah Pryor,
University of Louisville.
Jennifer Link,
KCDCS.
Sue Ellen Lathrop,
Western Kentucky University.
and Jackie Couture.
Eastern Kentucky University.
Thank you for all for being with us. So first, I'd like to make an announcement. This is regarding our December meeting. So the December meeting of the Libraries, Archives and Records Commission, it's the December meeting has been pushed back to January 18th, 2024, due to the at the request of our cabinet leadership. This is due to its proximity to the inauguration day. That's also happening that week. So we were just asked to push it back, which gives us just a week or two more to fix anything that we're going to add to these revisions. So just wanted to let you all know of that. And with that, we can move on to the discussion of the State University model. Actually, my bad. Yeah, we can move on to the discussion of the university model. I know, Vicki, you had a couple of points that you brought earlier this month. It was a follow-up on first the police background investigation records, and I know you wanted to get that completed and finished, and that's been on our plate for this year. So wanted to
I just want to be able to give them a definitive it fits in this series, or we need to do a new series, or what we're going to do, because they have, I think, 20 years of polygraph results that they want to deal with.
And just for a review, we're looking at background investigations for law enforcement officers as employees of the university. And your question was related to the polygraph tests that are conducted as part of that investigation. Now, I did speak with my colleagues in the local records branch, and I know that they have a polygraph examination record series on the local government's general schedule. But in discussion with them, I think that they're looking at condensing a lot of what they have, and it was kind of the opinion that this might be part of that hiring materials file. and especially since we're looking at a retention of 3 years, which is consistent with the hiring materials file. And maybe the option that we should explore is just amending that hiring process materials file to include just in the contents the polygraph for any position that requires it. Because I wanted to address the confidentiality that was noted, I think by your police chief, was that these are not subject to open records, and that is consistent with the statute. So we could just include that as well as part of that access restriction. I wanted to know if that's to the floor. Is that the the option we want to do.
And when I went back to look at it, that's basically what I was thinking is add to 645 and just clarify that it falls there. And then any of those restrictions.
All right. So what we'll do is my understanding is we'll revise that to include the polygraph in the contents. Which was there any change to the retention that we needed? I know looking at it, and I'll bring that up. Let me see if I can. All right. Share. Everybody seeing the hiring process schedule? Okay. So we have I think Sue Ellen had brought this up in an email about that some of this might not be applicable to the record series. It's also copied in the job description posts. But is there any change to the retention and disposition that would be recommended for this?
You might lose that last sentence because I mean, who's going to go back in the file 1 year short and pull out other materials? I think people will wait and get rid of it altogether at the 3 years.
Okay.
The only thing I will say in contrast to that is that when different people hold different, subsets or different parts of a hiring process materials file, but it's not the kind of like the formal file or like the central file, it can be helpful. I know that statement appears in other places. I mean, I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other. Retention of 2 versus 3 years is not a big deal, but it can be nice to have a distinction between sort of like a copy and the file that's maybe in the hiring official's office or computer.
Yeah, and say a lot of our business officers are probably responsible for keeping the record copy in the colleges, but then different departments would have a copy. So that's how we would use that here.
Okay. Yeah, so retaining we're keeping that 3 years, so that doesn't need to change. I guess this is a discussion of that last clarifying statement. Are we?
So my feeling is that if we're going, because so many of the retention, I don't know how many, but several, let's say, of the retention and disposition statements have that caveat in them, to retain copies essentially less than for a shorter time than the other time period. I think if we change it here, then we sort of put a pin in it to change them to go back and look at all of the others.
Okay.
Because it's going to be the same situation. Or we keep it.
Okay.
And I don't really care a whole lot, but I think it can be useful when people just proliferate copies everywhere.
Okay. Well, I think we may need to, let's err on the side of keeping that, because I don't think that changes any kind of functional operations. So we'll just amend the contents and the access restrictions to make sure we include the polygraph examinations as part of hiring materials, and word it in a way that includes any position that would make use of a polygraph, because it seems like it's something unique to law enforcement, but there could be another position that actually utilizes that as well.
And I'm assuming that the language evaluations would include background investigations, but I don't know, do we want to specifically say background investigations, including polygraphs?
Okay, yeah, I will. Background.
Because I know we always did background investigations for every single employee, including
Yeah.
certain employees, so.
Including polygraph. Right. Oh. That is all right. So, but to the contents, we'll add the background investigations language that includes background investigations, including polygraphs. We'll send that out when I get that draft done. Now, we'll go to your second point that you had brought up, Vicky, about the language on permanent retention, especially around minutes.
We just have so many different retained permanentlies that,
Mhm.
you know, and I know for our president's office, we don't have a storage area. We don't have a record storage area. It's, you know, they stay in the offices unless they're open records, and then they can come over here. So I think it's the idea of keeping everything 2 copies everywhere. But then the
Yeah.
other problem is most of the minutes are now produced in digitally. So we had those copies. We also have like a copy for access in our digital repository. We have a couple copies here. The only thing that we really don't have extra copies of would be the background records for background materials for the really early years. So I
Yeah.
didn't know whether we just want to have consistent language on some of these instead of always saying keep 1 copy here, keep 1 copy there. I feel like that was before we were scanning and retaining copies in more than 1 location. And that was kind of that just in case, you know, there was a fire or some kind of disaster with the original, we'd have a backup. So I'll be quiet now.
Excuse me. I know with the multiple paper copies, that seems a bit archaic. What I was going to actually say though is that identifying 1 copy to the university archives, 1 copy in the creating unit. I know on the state side, our minutes actually do reflect that the agency is keeping 1 and they're sending 1 to KDLA for central for our function of central repository. So there is 2 copies in that disposition. Now there is an example with the Department of Education, the Board of Education. There was 1 they create such a volume of materials with their minutes that their retention we moved to it's just retain 1 copy permanently, and then at some point that copy is the disposition says transfer to the state archives. So that is a separate item, and I know you would kind of distinguished out the Board of Regent minutes. You have so much volume, and I don't know if that's something you want to explore, just having. I know it's different because it's the same institution. It's the institution creating the minutes and then sending those minutes to themselves, where on the state side it is 1 agency creating them, sending them to another agency. So
Yeah, because physically it's really, I mean, maybe 2 different locations on campus, but it's really the same geographic location. So, you know, if the earthquake hit here, we're not really providing any safety that way, but
Yeah.
It doesn't say what format these minutes have to be in. They are born electronically, so they could be electronic in the president's office and paper in the archives.
yeah, I think the ones that she's worried about are the ones that were paper before we
Okay.
can turn digital. So it's a lot of it's the background materials from early years in the original copies of the minutes.
The president's office transferred all that to us probably 8 or 9 years ago. So
we have a copy that was transferred to us, but then they've also been following the letter of the series of keeping one in their office and transferring one to us.
we haven't been. We got a new president and they cleaned out all the vault and moved everything to us. So
Well, there is the line that retain excess copies until no longer useful. I don't know how that interpretation might be on the since these are, if there is a copy maintained in the archives, and then but one in the creating unit.
Yeah, because that's what the permanent minutes
Yeah.
are that way.
So
And we still have if it was created on paper, the permanent record that we would have to substitute, then would have to be an iReadable format, right? We're still at that point in Kentucky.
yes. Now, what we were doing is, once the physical copy was transferred to the state archives, the agency had that digital copy, and that was maintaining both the iReadable copy in the archives and then the digital copy that they had for office use. Because I know with the minutes, the purpose of keeping it in the creating unit is being able to fulfill those open meeting requirements. If somebody is asking for minutes, then you have to produce them. And for preservation purposes, the archives would receive them, and then the unit would have the copy that they could produce in event of that. So I don't know if that's kind of an option you could explore on that.
I mean, we have multiple copies, so they've scanned everything of the minutes. We haven't scanned all of the background materials. And that's where it starts to be, they just don't have the personnel, and quite frankly, NKU's in such a position right now that additional personnel are not going to happen, and additional funding for things is not going to happen, no matter how high up in the organization it is. And I don't really want them to send it to the basement of the building they're in, because that is prone to flooding. So it's an even worse scenario.
Yeah, but you said these were legacy. They're not creating new materials and sending them to the basement.
No, but they've run out of room for, I mean, their little storage closet is not that big, and that's taking up, all of their space. So they do have other things that they're trying to store that are permanent also.
And just for my own clarification, so that I'm not getting lost here in the weeds, the background materials that you're talking about, have those been transferred?
I would have to go back and look to see. I mean, if we got transfers from them, we have most of them. I'm not sure we have all of them. And I would be okay with them transferring the background materials to us as the preservation copy.
Yeah.
But that would put both copies, if we had duplicates, in one location. So I don't know. I just brought up the whole question of, do we need one here and one there? Because I've had times when they've had an open records request, and the first thing they do is contact the archives, and they don't even start looking for it in the creating unit.
Yeah. Sorry, it sounds to me like
And also because, I mean, we've got other things that we're not doing that way. Like the press releases are just retain one copy in the archives. And then get rid of the excess copy. So we're just not consistent in the schedule. And I realize that our board minutes are probably the most important record we could have here on campus, but I'm trying to accommodate the president's office also.
I think part of it goes back to immediacy, especially when they were paper. If they needed it, they had a copy. And now, if it's born digital and they have it, that covers their immediacy. So maybe they change it to electronic copy in that office should they decide to keep it. May not.
I mean, and that makes sense because when they were trying to search the minutes, that's why they decided to go. They went ahead and scanned all the minutes because they were having to go back and search minutes. So a searchable document was so much better than having to dig through the paper documents.
So I will just also mention something, another piece of this is that offices that I have worked with, including the president's office at UK, have used the retain one copy permanently in the office as a reason to not transfer things to the archives. So people are holding on to their minutes and these other sort of permanent record categories that are in the schedule because to the extent that they pay attention, which is not very much, but to the schedule, it's an excuse to hold on to things that probably should be, more carefully preserved and managed in the archives. And I don't know to what extent they are subject to open records requests at all, if that is one of the reasons for having two copies in the same agency. So I am also wondering if mainly the archives would be okay with fielding an open records request. Can the retention and disposition be like the press releases, Vicki, you were talking about, to retain one copy permanently in the archives, retain excess copies until no longer useful, and then every office can determine if their excess copy in whatever format is useful. And if they have a lot of open records requests, it might be useful to them, or if they need to refer to them for current needs. But mainly the point is the permanent records are transferred to the archives. Of course, that's if the archives has the space and capacity to handle them also, which is not necessarily true, but so just.
Well, that was, as you were saying that, Ruth, that occurs to me that, I remember talking with Sharon before she retired about KSU's capacity. They're following the schedule as well, and they might not have had the capacity to every department on campus be sending their permanent records to the archives. But I do think I know when Ashley and Jenny and I a couple years back during COVID were we were looking to retain, create consistent language in the state university model. One of the hangups we did occur was with these permanent retention ones, because their disposition instructions would be, are you keeping it in this unit? Does it need to go to the archives? And I think, I don't know if we touched the minutes one, or if we kept it as is, because again, it did kind of match the state general schedule. But it is our hope to get this consistent in a way that is workable for you all to use. So I can certainly make a list of all these permanent retentions and then see in what way we can make them consistent. And I can do that.
Yeah, it's publications, annual reports. I was just doing a search.
Yeah.
Periodic reports, research reports.
Yeah, I made a paper copy.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes when
Yeah.
we're talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, like recordings, let's see, press minutes, press releases, publications, reports, annual, any of those, summary, periodic, research projects, speeches,
Yeah.
papers.
And I'll see if we got my notes from our the ad hoc group that me, Ashley, and Jenny did. I'll see about those notes that we have. But in the meantime, I do think, the the burden of space being the being so, you know, at a premium. I think if you, as I understand it, minutes are intended to reflect, you know, when they occurred, who was present, and the actions taken by the body. At bare bones, that's what the minutes are required to reflect. I know some of the background material sometimes isn't part of that permanent permanent preservation on it. But if maybe if you can get that background material sent to the archives, they can scan what they need to. I know not microfilm it, but put it in a digital format that is accessible.
Yeah, the rest of it is already that way. So they have scanned all their minutes. So
yeah, and I mean that might be my recommendation. I don't know if that would be what the rest of the group might recommend to you for this workflow.
So just to get them to transfer, pretty much they could transfer their paper records with the background materials. I think probably before a certain time period is really would be helpful for them.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's part of the problem with some of the permanent records. It's like, well, maybe the office isn't ready to switch everything over because they're creating records as we're going. But, you know, where is that? Is it 5 years for most offices? Is it, you know, 2 years? Is it 10 years?
Of course, the
You might want to go with 5, knowing that they're going to do what they're going to do and keep it longer, or go with 3 and same thing. You might get them after 5.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, it's common sense, right? It's like, are you using those? Don't send them over if you're using them. But once you're not using them consistently, send them over to the archive so that they're actually going to be maintained permanently and not subject to loss.
Yeah. And sometimes that is, it's hard to put that into the document as, you know, something that is, you know,
it's hard to quantify
the way the statute behind it, where this just really needs to be at the discretion of the office's workflow. And
yeah,
and
with the suggested time period of
yeah. So yeah, for this, I will review the permanent records, look at my notes, and give you that recommendation that we just
okay.
did.
But you're pretty much thinking that the background materials would be okay to transfer those because they're really not part of the minutes per se. And then if the office already has copies, digital copies, even though they haven't gone through that.
Yeah, I think that meets the preserving the one copy and having the other copy.
And we've got like 3 or 4 places that those digital record or the digital minutes are. So it's not like it's just one location either. So, okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we could get the language similar, I guess, on some
Consistent.
of those permanent records.
With that, did anybody have any other items for discussion on the model, Utah State University model? Right.
Didn't we get something from Chris about she was trying to deal with the tax exempt for the state and it's not falling under the schedule. There's a federal tax forms, but not a state one. And I know Chris couldn't be here for this meeting.
Oh no.
It says, I do have some questions for the group. I emailed a couple of weeks ago. Let's see.
It's a tax
Retention of tax, supplied to vendors. You emailed, Vicki, you emailed back that you thought the copies supplied to vendors are part of the purchase order documentation, and those records fall under 239 general financial records. University's copy of tax exempt form not called out in the state university schedule, but listed in the general schedule for state agencies. 130 tax exemption authorization file is permanent.
But I think she came back with that's not exactly what they were thinking that was.
Yeah.
That U0245 is closer, but that just says federal. So maybe we could just adjust that to include state and federal? And would that? And then I think she also had that question of, hey, if we don't find it on our state university model, are we able to go to the other state agencies? You know, the general schedule and use those on ours?
To that question, I'll reply to her about that one. But I don't think that is the case because I think it needs to be
In our schedule.
in the state university model, which
But we can
Or
look to
can
that
we-
other model to kind of get an idea, hey, maybe we need to put it onto ours.
yeah, because I think the effort has been made to make the state university model as thorough and exhaustive as it can be, applying to all records, just as the the general schedule, and so it's kind of like a general schedule and agency specific, just all together for those departments. So if there is a record that is not reflected, then yeah, we would need to take a look at it and review.
I pretty much just look at that as a reference, like, oh, wait a minute, if we didn't cover it, did somebody else already cover it in the state?
Yeah. Actually, my apologies. I actually did not see this email from her. So I
I
will.
mean, is it possible that we could just change the 245 to be federal and state tax forms?
Yeah, it might be as let's see if I can. U0245.
Mhm.
You know, examples. Yeah, because it just says, I mean, the name of the series is Federal Tax Forms. So if we can see if something is as simple as adding federal and state tax forms, and then it covers those 4 years after the date of the tax.
Add tax exempt certificate language in there.
Yeah.
So she's talking about the tax exempt forms that we give to vendors, right?
Mhm.
Why would that not be part of the vendor process? And part of that retention?
For the procurement,
Yes.
which to me is like general financial records, right? Isn't that part of the?
Probably.
Okay.
And the other question, would the burden fall on the vendor and not us?
Yeah, that's true too, because we're providing it for their purposes. I mean, it's not really something that is even our record.
It's pretty much saying why the vendor didn't pay state tax, right?
But probably the deal is they have a ton of copies of those. So they make a cop, they send the thing to the vendor and then they've got their copy that they did it. So what do they do with their copies is basically the thing.
Supplied to vendors are part of the purchase order documentation.
And it also brings up the question of why is it permanent on the state agency schedule?
That almost sounds like it is the tax exempt certificate that you would keep permanently.
But that would still be more on the vendor than on us. I mean,
Oh.
if we had one as a state institution, that's one thing, but to keep copies of all the vendor ones.
I interpret that as being, that's the document that we get from the state that says you are tax exempt and here's your number.
Maybe you actually just need a copy of what she's talking about
Yeah.
to be able to figure out without us trying to guess.
Yeah. I think this discussion might just be able to, we'll move it to an email and get the example from her and follow up with her on that. Yeah. Because again, like you said, Vicky, I'd rather not make any decisions on amending schedules with guesswork. So we'll get a more thorough, clarifying follow up and work from there.
We're all describing the elephant's parts, right?
All right. Well, was there any other discussion? I don't think there was. I didn't have any other business to announce. Just again, the postponement of the December commission, which kind of gives us a extra 2 weeks to get get that draft for the amending U0645 done. And there's nothing else to discuss, so call for it.
I mean, Lois is retiring, so
Oh,
how many people knew that?
congratulations to her. Well, thank you all for another good meeting, and I'll get that draft to you as soon as I can.
Great.
All right, so the group can see what we're doing. All right. Well, thank you, and have a good day.
Bye.